Let's play a little bit of a journalist asking the president what he wants the president of South Africa to do about these claims.
What would you like President Ramaphosa to do about the situation?
I don't know.
Just see it on the screen.
I don't know. Look, these are articles over the last few days. Death of people. Death. Horrible death. Death. I don't know.
But you know that
To
there
pick
are
anyone,
people who are
white
fighting
South
for-
Africans are fleeing because of the violence and racist laws. And this is all. I mean, I'll give these to you.
No, I'd like
So
to-
when you say what would I like to do, I don't know what to do. Look at this. White South African couples say that they were attacked violently.
President Trump, when will you go and see for yourself if it isn't?
Well, I could do that.
Our government policy is completely against what he was saying, even in the parliament. And they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
But you do
Which-
allow them to take land.
No.
You do allow them to take land.
Nobody can
And then
take
when
land.
they take the land, they kill the white farmer. And when they kill the white farmer, nothing happens to them.
No, there is quite
Nothing happens to
There
them.
is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people. And we have now
The
been
farmers are
utilized-
black. The farmers are not black.
We have
I don't
now-
say that's good or bad, but the farmers are not black.
Okay, so good news. We've gotten our systems worked out. I want to play you a big chunk of the meeting between the two of them and what kind of started this all off. So bear with us, but this is gonna show you, the viewer, how this kind of fell into or was purposely pushed into a Zelensky-esque confrontation at the White House.
What will it take for you to be convinced that there's no white genocide in South Africa?
We have thousands of stories talking about it, and we have documentaries, we have news stories, and that. Is Natalie here? Somebody here to turn that? I could show you a couple of things, and I have to. It has to be responded to.
Yeah, sure.
Let me see the articles, please, if you would, and turn the lights down. Turn the lights down, and just put this on. It's right behind you, Johan.
There's nothing this parliament can do. With or without you, people are going to occupy land. We require no permission from you, from the president, from no one. We don't care. We can do whatever you want to do.
Now, this is very bad. These are burial sites right here. Burial sites. Over 1,000 of white farmers, and those cars are lined up to pay love on a Sunday morning. Each one of those white things you see is a cross, and there's approximately 1,000 of them. They're all white farmers, the family of white farmers. And those cars aren't driving, they're stopped there to pay respects to their family member who was killed. And it's a terrible sight. I've never seen anything like it. Both sides of the road, you have crosses. Those people were all killed.
Have they told you where that is, Mr. President? No. I'd like to know where that is, because this I've never seen. Okay.
I mean, it's in South Africa. That's
Okay, so Eli, now that we've gotten a lot of the setup and the exposition out of the way, again, I'm going to ask you, what was? I know you're reporting on this today. What was the point of this by the White House? Why are they choosing to do this? Why did they choose to ambush the South African president? Why was Elon Musk there? Do you have any idea?
Well, Katie, I mean, it was an ambush, but it was also a very predictable one, given that the president has been so outspoken about this issue for several years now, as have others in his orbit, including Elon Musk, Tucker Carlson being another one. So I think President Ramaphosa was prepared for that today, and you saw him try to really temper what Trump was presenting and try to explain softly without seeming to be correcting the president. But why would Donald Trump be fixated on this issue and presenting these claims of genocide that are seem to be very much exaggerated, to say the least? Well, you know, you and I both covered his 2016 campaign. We've been covering him for the better part of a decade. Donald Trump is a politician who has always focused on the politics of white grievance, white persecution. And that is the same story that he is telling about something going on in South Africa. And so, you know, he obviously was much more determined, put a lot more time into thinking about how to elevate it, how to present this. Turning the lights down, having a video element in an Oval Office spray, as Kelly said, is unusual. They put a lot of thought into that aspect of it, the theater of this. But the president did not have, as you already played for viewers, did not have an answer to the question of what he wants South Africa to do about this. And at the end of this hour-long exchange in front of the White House press pool in the Oval Office, a reporter asked the president if he had his mind made up that there is indeed a genocide taking place in South Africa against white farmers. And he said, no, my mind's not made up. So for all the certainty that he spoke with about what is going on in South Africa, when he was faced with that very pointed question, he hedged. And so I think that tells you that this White House is interested in elevating this as an issue because they think it will speak to their base and to the same white fears that have helped or that have led some voters to gravitate towards Donald Trump, kept those voters with Donald Trump for a long time. I think this is more about signaling a value, values and priorities and issues and themes that are relevant to Donald Trump rather than it is actually, about coming up with solutions. He'll leave that to South Africa, but it is also guiding U.S. policy. As Kelly pointed out, Trump cut off all aid to South Africa just weeks after taking office. He may not attend the G20 in South Africa in November. There are a lot of frustrations, and beyond this, there's frustrations with, with South Africa accusing Israel of genocide in the International Criminal Court. So there are a lot of ways in which South Africa has sort of run afoul of folks in this White House. But Donald Trump was asked about that too. Didn't bring that up, kind of just let that question pass by. He wanted to focus and almost exclusively focus on the issue of white farmers and these specious claims of genocide.
Yeah, Eli, I think that's so well put. Julia, and to only further underscore this, and I mentioned this at the top, there are concerns about Donald Trump letting in these white Afrikaners and going after the South African president, while at the same time, this administration on day one shut down the refugee resettlement program, shut it down. So that means that there are thousands of refugees all over the world who have been waiting to get into this country, have been vetted, they're waiting in camps, and they cannot get in. And these are people who are, by and large, not white.
Right, and that includes people who served with U.S. troops in Afghanistan, the very thing he criticized the Biden administration for mishandling. And so while in the Oval Office today, he said, look, we have this refugee program, or one of the ways the White House has defended this is that we have a refugee program to bring in people who are persecuted around the world. The fact is they're only making this exception for this one particular group. And as you said, these are people who have been waiting years. It's really the strictest way, the highest level of security vetting you could possibly have to be able to get into the United States. Not only are you interviewed in person by the UNHCR, you also have U.S. vetting that goes on. It is at least a 2-year process. And it is up to an administration every year to notify Congress where they will set that bar. It got as high as about 115,000. It really, under the Biden administration, it started to rise under the Obama administration with the conflict in Syria. under the first Trump administration, they brought that way down. They brought it really between 10 and 20,000 per year, and they were hardly ever meeting that. But this was the first time really in recent history that they've completely shut down the refugee program. And it's something we are barely even talk about because of everything happening with deportations and asylum in this country. But what's happened is that there's been this special carve out, particularly for this group, while there is undoubtedly war and famine and horrible situations and political upheaval around the world in so many different countries, including countries that people are fleeing from, trying to come across the border. And to shut down those legal pathways undoubtedly has ramifications globally. And so this is a very particular way really to try to use that tool once again just to benefit one thing that the president is interested in. And again, as Eli said, he hasn't really come to the decision this is genocide. But the definition of genocide, according to the 1948 Convention on Genocide, is that it has to be the intentional, someone has to commit genocide with the intention of exterminating, trying to exterminate an entire group, an ethnic group or a religious group. And it's very hard to argue that that is at all